Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Kelley Brannon was an artsy and fun kid growing up in New Hampshire. She loved adventure, making friends, and having life experiences. When she graduated high school, Kelley would actually document her journey hitchhiking across the country. Her dream was to turn that footage into a documentary. She would travel as far south as Mexico and north all the way up to Canada. She eventually did return home and go to college, earning a master's degree in creative writing. Kelley would live in New York City for 10 years, working and getting involved in the music scene. It would be music that would take her to Florida. She played her guitar in small venues, street fairs, really anywhere she could. She met her boyfriend in Florida while performing at a club and stayed in Florida until the two of them decided to move to Detroit, Michigan. During an overnight stay in Live Oak, Florida, Kelley and her boyfriend had a fight. Kelley slung her guitar over her shoulder and walked away from the motel they were staying in. Kelley would not be seen or heard from again. Where is Kelley Brannon? Hello, and welcome to the Where Are They podcast, a weekly show dedicated to telling the stories of the missing, the stories that people need to know about. Our podcast is also produced for YouTube and online in written form, so whatever your preference for getting these stories, you have your choice. We want the names of the missing to reach as many people as possible. Our goal is also to be able to help these families and the organizations that are dedicated to helping find the missing and support their loved ones. Our Patreon supporters help us do just that, and I am forever thankful to you all. I want to welcome Bonnie and Rebecca as our newest Patreon members. Thank you so much for your support of the show. So let's get into this super mysterious story of Kelley Brannon. And like always, I encourage you to keep an open mind. This case is unsolved and Kelley is still missing. Kelley Kristen Brannon was born May 2nd, 1984 in New Hampshire, where she would spend her childhood growing up. An active and fun-loving, artsy child, Kelley couldn't wait to explore and see the world. And that's exactly what she would do as soon as she graduated high school. While most people talk about doing exciting and dangerous things, Kelley actually went out there and did it. With her video camera in tow, Kelley hitchhiked across the U.S. and documented the entire journey. She traveled all over, including Mexico and Canada, before she would eventually return home and enroll in college. Kelley not only got her bachelor's degree, but also got her master's degree in creative writing. Kelley then moved to New York City, where she would live and work for 10 years. While in New York City, Kelley discovered the music scene and found another passion. She played guitar and would start her own one-woman punk rock band. She had an extremely unique style, and people loved her for that. Kelley also became very involved in women's rights and was part of many protests and events that happened, not only in New York City, but she would travel to go to some large events across the country. She became known to those around her as an extremely passionate activist. When Kelley felt strongly about something, everyone would know about it. Just to give you a little insight into Kelley's personality, here is a clip of her in an interview with Rafe the Man. The point of this interview was to put a liberal, Kelley, up against a very conservative man to spark conversation. You can definitely get a feel for Kelley's personality in this interview.
can't breathe.
My gender is actually far more valuable than your gender, to be
I don't
honest.
go through menopause.
Which is why religion has
We're
taken
not.
every opportunity to repress us.
So what I tell you, Peter? What I tell you, Peter?
You think I'm very violent?
Don't say it, because she'll get upset.
I'm really not that violent.
No, I said. If she
I'm kinda all
touches me,
talk.
can I kiss her? That's what I said.
Wait, what?
He said he couldn't beat me up. So I said, how do you know she's gonna beat me up? Maybe she's gonna try to kiss me.
Why are you jealous of people with no legs?
No, I said sometimes I feel jealous.
Well, why?
Because their potential is so high that they get to live life in such a hard situation and serve God, and I don't get that potential. Sometimes just to identify, I'll go 2 or 3 blocks out of the way to see if I can court a woman in a wheelchair, but she usually rejects me.
Fuck all that. What about transgenderism?
I'm against that.
Oh, what?
Yeah, way against
How can you just answer that as blanket? Why are you against it? You're against someone feeling like themselves?
Yes. Celebrating it, sorry.
So you don't think an individual should celebrate themselves?
No, not now I know. I know that. No.
That's really sad.
I'm very against it.
Sorry.
It would be her music that would take her on the road traveling again. Kelley looked for venues where she could play and was very much involved in the music scene. She made a lot of friends along the way, and everyone really liked her. In June of 2019, Kelley would meet her boyfriend Eddie while in Florida at one of these venues. Soon after meeting, they began dating. Eddie, as most people who knew Kelley, would say that she was a one-of-a-kind. Her music was intense, and she was outspoken, funny, and adventurous spirit. The relationship was not without problems, however. In fact, on December 26, 2019, just one day after Christmas, the police were called for a domestic dispute, and Eddie would be arrested for hitting Kelley in the face. At this time, they were living in Gainesville, Florida. The two would reconcile, but friends said their relationship continued to be tumultuous. During this time, Kelley had also been diagnosed with PTSD due to some childhood trauma. I don't have much information on that other than knowing that her dad passed away when she was just 5 years old, but her trauma was significant enough that she was able to start collecting disability. She initially received a lump sum and decided she wanted to use that money to buy a house, mortgage-free, and it was decided that she could pay cash for a house in Detroit, Michigan. So that's just what her and Eddie decided to do. The Disappearance. In July of 2020, Kelley and Eddie decided to get a fresh start and move to Detroit. Kelley was 36 years old and figured it was time to buy a house and settle down a bit. They planned on each driving their own cars with all of their belongings, and that included 8 chickens and a dog. I can't even imagine traveling with 8 chickens. Shortly into their trip, however, Eddie's car began having transmission troubles, and they would end up stopping for a few days to get it fixed. At first, they camped out in their vehicle, and this story would kind of evolve as time went on, but soon that became too much, and Eddie suggested that they get a motel room. They found a really cheap room in Live Oak, Florida at the Sunshine Inn. They wanted to save as much money as they could for their house and their new life up in Detroit. Now, the reviews of the Sunshine Inn aren't great, but that's really the case for a lot of these little roadside motels that are older and really just offer the bare minimum. But for Kelley and Eddie, that's all that they needed, a cheap place to sleep for the night. On the evening of July 14th, Eddie and Kelley had an argument at the Sunshine Motel. The argument was about the chickens. Kelley wanted to bring them into the hotel room with them. She didn't want to leave them out in the car. They were in an extra large dog crate, but Eddie did not want them in the room with them. He said they smelled bad and he was afraid the motel would kick them out. But the argument escalated, and eventually Eddie reluctantly brings the chickens into the hotel room. However, the argument and the fighting didn't end. So Kelley started to walk away, slinging her guitar over her shoulder and walking out of the hotel parking lot. Eddie decided to stay in the hotel room, and the two would continue to text back and forth. Around 10:30 p.m., Eddie went outside the room to look for Kelley and found her sitting on the curb, clearly intoxicated and crying. Here is what Eddie has to say about that encounter with Kelley.
Around 10:30, Kelley's sitting at the bottom of the stairs. She was hysterical crying. I went down, I slipped the keys off of her waist. She looks up at me like I just took her soul. And I just went back into the room. That was the last time I saw her. That next morning, I looked over in the bed. She wasn't there.
Now, he tried to get her to come back in the hotel room for the night, but she refused. Eddie did take her car keys because he was afraid she would leave and she was in no state to drive. Plus, now they only had one car between the two of them. So he took her car keys and went back to his hotel room. Around midnight, she sent him a text saying that she was leaving him. At 1 o'clock in the morning of July 15th, 2020, Kelley called Eddie, but he didn't answer. Eddie said that he had shut his phone off just after the last text he got around midnight and decided to go to sleep. She did leave him a voicemail telling him that she was going to stay at the motel but was getting her own room. But suddenly she halted her sentence and telling him that she was getting into a car and then hung up. Eddie didn't know whose car she was getting into. Later, witnesses did come forward saying that they saw Kelley walking near the motel around 1 o'clock in the morning. She was alone, the guitar was slung over her shoulder. They didn't see anybody with her or around her. The next morning, however, Kelley was nowhere to be found and no longer answering any phone calls or text messages. Kelley Brannon had disappeared. The search. Eddie began searching for Kelley himself. He packed up the car and drove around looking everywhere he thought she might be, everywhere around Live Oak, where they had been spending the last few days. He also started calling her friends to see if anyone had heard from her, but no one had. So everyone started to try and contact her, to no avail. All of her friends were on high alert that something was wrong because this was very out of character for Kelley. It was Eddie who would report Kelley missing that day. And law enforcement said they interviewed Eddie for over 3 hours. Now, the search for Kelley would be difficult. Of course, authorities knew early on that Eddie and Kelley had a rocky relationship, and he was looked at right away as a person of interest. However, Eddie remained cooperative and insistent that he was innocent and wants to find Kelley as much as everyone else. Plus, we do have witnesses who saw her walking away from the hotel alone, and that cryptic voicemail. Authorities did find most of her personal belongings in her car. She had really taken nothing with her except her guitar as far as they could tell. She had left behind her wallet, her purse, her ID, everything a person would need to make it on their own. Now, the area of Live Oak, Florida is an interesting one. While the town itself is very small and rural, it sits on the crossroads of a few different major highways, making it a pass-through town for thousands of people every day. Interstate 90 and Interstate 129 run right through the town. And the major Interstate 10, which is the main thoroughfare from Florida to the West Coast, also runs right by Live Oak. The questions ran through everyone's mind. Did something happen between her and Eddie? Or was there another person at the hotel that harmed Kelley? Or maybe she left with someone else. So where do they even search? There were no clues. There was no trail to follow. And despite her being a constant traveler herself, very much a free spirit, a nomad, she kept in regular contact with her mom back home in New Hampshire. But her mom had not heard from Kelley either, so this really made the running away theory very unlikely. The investigation. There wasn't much to search, so the investigation into her disappearance started right away. It was noted that she left behind her purse and wallet. It was also learned that her phone pinged in downtown Live Oak about an hour after she left the voicemail for Eddie, making everyone wonder if she had indeed gotten into someone else's car and went to downtown Live Oak. Eddie spearheaded the search for Kelley, keeping her information online and pushing authorities for answers. Law enforcement learned that as soon as Kelley and Eddie had broke down in Live Oak, they had frequented a Mexican restaurant named Armando's. Eddie told authorities that while talking to people at Armando's, the owner of the restaurant came forward as he had heard that they needed some place to keep their 8 chickens, and he said he had a chicken coop on his property. They were welcome to come down and leave their chickens in the chicken coop. Kelley and Eddie decided to take him up on the offer, and they drove 20 minutes to his house and decided to camp to sleep right outside the chicken coop to save money. This was, of course, before deciding to go get a hotel. Eddie said it was a bit creepy at this guy's house. It was off the beaten path, and he really got a weird vibe. He wasn't even exactly sure where they were. But when investigators went to Armando's to verify this story and get more information, they were told that that never happened. So no one is quite sure what really did happen. Eddie is sticking to his story, and the restaurant owner is sticking to his. There were many people within Live Oak that Eddie and Kelley interacted with, and investigators had to start needling through all of them. This included people at Armando's as well as people at the Sunshine Inn, many of whom were transients, and many, they learned, that had criminal backgrounds. In fact, the gentleman in the room right next to Eddie and Kelley's was a criminal that was well known to the Live Oak Police Department. Eddie said that this man continued to push for Kelley to come into his room that night that Eddie and Kelley were fighting. This man ended up going to Eddie's room, knocking on the door, and telling him that Kelley was upset and crying and that Eddie needed to do something about it. This was the 10:30 p.m. encounter that Eddie had described when he had gone outside and found her crying on the curb. He had done so because this man told him she needed him. Police began to watch and scour the surveillance footage at the motel, but there was a few things that stood out to them. First, the quality of the footage isn't great. It's actually pretty terrible. Second, Kelley can be seen on camera a few different times, walking back and forth through the parking lot. She wasn't obviously inebriated. I mean, she might have been, but she was walking around just fine. It was really kind of hard to tell on the video, so authorities weren't sure what to make of that. She was also completely alone, and there was no one else they could see in the footage. Eddie continued to push for authorities to give this man in the room next to them a polygraph. He was suspicious of him, but ultimately authorities ruled him out as having anything to do with Kelley's disappearance. I do want to play for you Kelley's last voicemail that was left for Eddie. The cryptic voicemail, which indicated that she possibly had gotten into someone else's car. So law enforcement began looking deeper into Eddie's story. They learned he had been abusive previously with Kelley, and they subpoenaed his phone records. They were able to corroborate most of what Eddie had said. They could read through those text messages, and everything did seem to add up. They were fighting, they were arguing, but then they got to the voicemail that Eddie said she left for him. There was indeed a voicemail recorded at 12:59 a.m. However, that call wasn't on the call log. And while people online have dove into that fact, T-Mobile, who was their cell phone provider, said that it was most likely because Eddie's phone was turned off at the time, which, remember, Eddie said it was. He had said he was sick of the fighting around 12:30, just shut his phone off to try to go to sleep. So here is the voicemail that Kelley left for Eddie that night, or early morning, actually. Take a listen.
Oh, great, you're sleeping. I'm so glad I got a message from you before telling me how you're sorry and you love me and how you want me so much and all that bullshit just to get my car. Well, anyways, I rented my own room at the Sunshine Inn and I've reported my car stolen. You are not a partner. You're not a partner. You turn me a
This is the very last communication known from Kelley Brannon. Does it contain a clue? Did Kelley indeed get into someone's car? If so, whose was it? And what happened from there? Most importantly, where is Kelley? What I also find interesting is that if someone had offered her a ride and she had declined, or if she had indeed gotten into someone's car who took them somewhere else and was completely innocent of anything, why hasn't that person come forward to identify themselves? Kelley's case became pretty big for a moment on the internet as she had so many friends from all over the country from her travels. They kind of joined together to help find her and spread the word or figure out what might be going on. Interestingly, law enforcement said they have several persons of interest in this case. What do you think could have happened to Kelley Brannon? Kelley is described as a Caucasian female, 5'5" tall and weighing around 110 pounds when she was last seen. She was 36 years old in July of 2020 and would today be 38. Kelley has gray-black hair and blue eyes and was wearing a white shirt with black shorts when she was last seen on that surveillance camera in the parking lot of the Sunshine Inn. Kelley also has a tattoo of the letter A inside a circle on her right hand, right near her thumb. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Kelley Brannon, please contact Crime Stoppers of Suwannee County at 386-208-8477. Thank you so much for listening to Kelley's story today. Kelley's mother still hopes and prays she will get answers soon on where her daughter is. And there's a huge community of musicians, artists, activists, and friends across the country that still work to keep Kelley's case open. There is a Facebook page set up for her, Missing Kelley Brannon. Please go give it a follow. Show your support to the family and the friends of Kelley. There are also some discussion groups you can find online. I'm not sure who monitors them, if they're family or friends. So please be cautious when joining any group that you're not sure of, but definitely go like her official page, Missing Kelley Brannon. As always, please make sure to follow us on social media for any case updates. And if you'd like to support the show, please consider joining us over on Patreon. You can find the link in our show notes. Thank you again for tuning in today. We will be back again next week with another unsolved missing persons case. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.